So sorry, I thought to break this video into two rather than doing one long video. So the last video we saw mass assignment and privilege escalation in demo. So today we are going to look at, and in this session, the next session, we are going to look at how to protect against mass assignment and privilege escalation um, using DTOs. Okay, and how do we do that? Well, first of all, like I said, we're going to create a folder called DTO. So you go there and you click new, you click package, and then you name that folder DTOs, right? So in that package or the folder, I'll call it, we're going to create a class called user DTO. Okay, and this is not an entity. This is not a domain object. This is not a code. It is just an object that defines inputs and outputs for your systems for each endpoint. Okay, so here, if you look at the user controller, what we actually want for the updates is that we want to only accept inputs for what? Where's the update? We want to only accept input. Let's look at the user entity for the first name, not the ID, the last name, right? So the first name, the last name, and maybe the username, maybe not actually. Maybe you only want to have some systems have one username, but let's just say we don't want to accept username change here, and we don't want to accept email change. We only want to accept first name, last name, and we don't also want to accept password here, right? Just for this update section. Maybe you have a different endpoint that is proprietary for updating password. A lot of systems, in fact, current system is a better design to have a different entire mechanism for updating password, and you also don't want to have that. So we only want to have these two fields in our update. This is all what we want to allow the user to be able to update. So we can create a user DTO, or in this case, actually, we are going to rename it to be rename. So update, we're going to rename it to update request. Right? This is a DTO, it doesn't have to be user DTO. We're going to name it update request, factor that, and we're going to give it the fields that we want to update: private string first name, right? And we want to do the second one, private string last name. So with that, we can now update our controller to use, right, to take in update request. Okay, no, that's to get all markings. Sorry. So in our update endpoint, we can do update request. So that is user, and we are also going to update the update endpoint here to also take in update as the input. And in the update request, now that we have update request, the next thing we have to do is transfer this updated object, the updated information to an actual entity. Okay, so what we have defined our update request wrong, because now I realize that we need an actual user ID. So we are going to come back to our update request and we're going to put in the ID. So private user, private integer int. So I have like ID. Okay, so in our user model, it's an integer operator. This big integer. So we have an ID, and this is going to allow us to do the implementation in the controller, in the service layer. And what we're going to do is we are going to find, so the first thing is find user by ID, and that's going to be we're going to create a variable. So this, we should not name it user because we just put it on request. Okay, so we have a variable user equal to find by ID or get ID. Now request.get ID We're supposed to have the getters and setters again, like we talked about. We're going to use Lombok, and we're going to do add data, right? That's going to bring the getters and setters. We're also going to use add all args constructor and add no args constructor, just to make sure that they have constructors there. And then when we have that, we can come back to our service and you see that is gone. So what this line does is it goes to the database and find the by user. This method is found in JPA. As you can see, it's a already developed method, implemented method in JPA. So once you find the user by the ID, you have a user object. You check if the user is empty. Okay, so check if user is empty, because this find returns an optional, and an optional means that there can be something inside and there can be nothing inside. So what you're checking is it empty? If it is empty, then if it is empty, then you throw. If there's nothing found, then that means that this user you're trying to update is not found inside there, right? It's not found in the database. And the third thing is so when you check, so you find the user by the ID, you check if it is empty, and now you have a user variable. What you want to do is you want to update user details, okay? And typically, you would basically do user.get first name. So you basically get the user from this user that you got from the database, and you want to get the first name, right? And then you want to set that first name to the request information. So let me see. Right, and you can also do user.get set last name. But you can also have a situation, but you also want to do that if any of these sections are filled. Okay, if they are, if let's just say they have changed, right? So you want to check. So before you update any of these values, you maybe want to check here if they are empty, right? So if user dot get, no, not row, user dot get so if request dot get first name dot is empty, so you want to check if it is not empty. Right, so if it is not empty, you want to do all of this there. All right, so that's what you want to do, and you also want to do the check here. So you want to do, right, get last name is not empty. You want to move all of that. Now, if that's the case, after you've updated it, you simply now want to save that user. So you want to try, let's see if user, save updated user, and we want to do, I think what will be more important here, let's see what's happening. Invert type, get, although this dot get, we want to make sure that you kind of like this correct, but you don't want to always be using it. So normally you extract the dot get methods into an actual user, so this could be like a different variable. So you could put dot is present, So you could literally check that. If user else, you could do user equals to this user.get. Oh, okay, so we'll have like so let's see GB user, they'll have like a variable here, user. Then we're going to have the GB user here again. And so right here we'll simply just ignore the .get. Oh, sorry, user.get. So GB user, sorry, .get. We have that, and so here becomes user, and this .get is no longer needed. You don't want to do all of that. Okay. It's just much more cleaner code. Obviously, it adds memory there because we're using memory to save that variable. Then with this, you could literally just save your inputs there. We have orm.user repository.users. There we go. So we have a not found. We check for user if user is not found. And then you could also, and because of this, because you're using like a DTO, you could use validations in here. Okay, you could validate with annotations. Let's say we use like custom validations with Lombok. I think we can search that. Let me see. This is custom validation string good with Lombok. Yeah, so you can say create an interface, custom validation annotation. This annotation will be specify the validator. Implement the validator logic. Create a class implementing constraint validator that contains your validation logic. So yeah, you could create your own custom validators. Basically, we have like utils. What we could do is create like a package here, validator. I think this is already used somewhere, but let's create like a package, and then we're going to have, I think, yeah, we have like validator. We're going to have so it's going to be an interface. So this is going to be an annotation. So this annotation is going to be what are we going to call it? So what do we want to validate? So we want to validate you can like do like special characters, right? Or it is clean. You can say special character validator. It contains special, let's just say it contains special char. And not, let's say not contain special char, and say this what the next step, create a class implementing the constraint validator class. So create a class implementing constraint validator that contains your validation logic. Let's see. Okay, so it's an implementation not contains special info, and this is going to implement means constraint wait, hold on. So implement so create a class implementing constraint validator that contains the validation logic. There is valid method should run true for valid. So the first thing is, so define the custom annotation, create a Java interface for your this annotation will specify the validator class and default error message. Right, so let's look at that. Let's look at an implementation here. Annotation, use controller, no. Custom validator. Oh, okay, so we have. Okay, so the interface. I was wondering, it's the interface. Yeah, we think we do that too. That implements is valid class. Let me see. So yeah, so target equals element by field and attention one time. There we go. So what this is saying is that here we are going to do at constraint, except I am not doing that well. So I think there are dependencies I need to add. Oh yeah, so it is the validation dependency. There we go. So in the POM file, we can go one step down. So just no dependency provided. We could simply just add a validation dependency there, and then we load Maven, we resolve Maven dependencies. And that is why I kind of had an error here. And there we go. So the constraint validator, and this definitely have the constraint validator here. And we can import the class and import all of this. And there we go. We have our constraint validator implemented perfectly. And this implement constraint validator, that's why I was typing it and it wasn't going. But you can also have this, you can do the constraint validator here. I think what can constraint validate by, and then you call this class, where is it, not implementation.class, and then you specify I think it's field type or something. What's the next one? It's a target and then a retention. So we have like target elements and parameters. We can have like targets to be parameters too. We can have like fields. But why is this not giving me a dependency? Could I like import Jakarta? Right, well, that work? No, that doesn't cut it. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to do. Target annotation. There we go. Annotation. Okay. So, and then we have runtime retention at runtime, and then you implement the validation method. The first field contains special characters. They have the class. Blah, blah, blah. Let's see. String default input. Then have the class group default. Class extend payload. I don't want to do all of that, so this is a bit long. So what I wanted to do has been done before. I know we are doing a lot here, so just bear with me. I just wanted to show you. Okay, we have that, and I think this works better. I don't know if that works better. I'll implement this class, the string, and this way checking the string contains any special characters. So we don't want, so return is valid. So we want to check is valid. So we want to do the implementation, and then it's going to be in the request, and I think this is going to be the annotation, not contain special characters. Also going to have not contain special character, and so that could be as the implementation return. And I think that it is supposed to return so this method basically takes in it implements this particular interface, and you initialize not container. You can initialize that. No initialization needed, but it also implements this method, which is valid method, and this method is what does the validation logic. And what we're doing here, we're checking if the value is first of all not null. If it is null, we return true. Consider null as valid, or use null for null checks. We can also make sure that the stuff is not null. We can use at not null, right? At not null itself. So, but we can also do all the checks here. Return false. Yes. So just to make sure we don't consider null as valid, so we don't need to check that. So if we do that, then in the request data we don't need the null check. Yeah. Yes. And that will be our custom query. And we update that and we check for special characters. And this is just basic validation, and we're using annotations to do that, custom annotations. This allows us to reuse this annotation easily across the application. If we have another place where we want to check for special characters, we can simply define, we can simply use this not contain special characters annotation there. And this is our check. So we have our update request. We have our user controller, which takes the update request. We have our service that checks for, it validates the request at the controller level. I think here we're going to do at validate. I think it's validate. Is validate? Valid. Yeah. We use at valid to make sure that the validation is done. Again, if we cross-check with the result, then we should see in the controller, somewhere in the controller, you see the add valid annotation there. There we go. So it's important that we put the add valid annotation here. I don't know if it comes before or after the request body, but either way. So we validate our request. So we run this. Again, let's look at the service. The service gets the user data and the request. So this allows us to simply change. So what happens is, if I go to the update section again, remember the last time we were able to update all of these fields, and I just want to update John, the ID of John 1 to actually John 3, and the second name to John 2, and I run that. And if I change this to user, what we're expecting to see is that only these two to change. The user should not change. If I change the password to say 14, and even the mail to anything, right, we should look at is that it still stays the same. The password is the same, the role is still admin, the username is still the same, the email is still the same. What changes is the first name and the last name, right? Now what if I added that, say, first name, I added an empty user, or let's say I added a user that is not found in the database. What is going to happen? We're going to get not found, as we described. If I added special characters, what do we get? We get a 200. So I think we're not handling the special characters correctly. We are validating that, and we're passing that into so let's check our implementation again. Now what I would do is use the other method. I think this method, I don't think this is managed by Spring. Or is it? this component. I don't think that was managed by Spring. Do I try that? It still sends the okay. So if it doesn't matches, so what we're saying, if it matches, then that's true, and return the null of that, which is false. What I want to do is do system.out here, just for debugging purposes, .print line. The validation password value. So we kind of no. Let me see if that is called in the first place. Okay, I want to see if this method is called. If that's not called, then the problem is somewhere else. So I just need to verify that when we call that method, we are definitely passing. So yeah, we are not passing that. So that process that is not being called, and I think it's because we are. So we have to do the constraint. And then we have the target element fields that actually just want the field, not the element, not the parameter, just the field. And I also want to do retention to the runtime. And then we'll do the string message field contains special characters, default group, payload default. And what does this particular one tells us to do? So it says the class group default and class extends payload default. Do something like that. Yeah. Okay. And then we have the implementation class. Also, we can have no character. So we name this. It's a better name. I'm just copying no character validator. It's just a better name, so it's not like trying to just stuff. And then we are going to implement our check implementation. And we're going to have What does it implement? Let's check it out. Boolean is valid. Yeah. So like, why does it? Because it is now implementing the valid, but then medium email constraint validator. Oh, this okay. This one implements constraint validator. Sorry, constraint validator, and there we go. And then it definitely implements the rest. Yeah. So that's it. Okay. Let's return false. Or we could simply just throw an error here, right? We could throw an error, right? We could throw, again, we could throw an exception, we could throw input, so put empty or null input exception. So we could create this exception in the exception class, for the class called empty or null exception. And again, it's just a simple exception that extends the counter exception class, and we could handle that in the global exception handler, which we're going to add exception handler, and we're going to call that, and we're going to do class, and what it's going to do, we're going to respond with status HTTP bad request, and we're going to we're going to do public, and we're going to handle the exception, and we're going to return the exception get message as we've done countless times. So right now we have we're going to import this class now. Exception handler. Why am I empty or null exception? Create empty or null. I don't know. Can't I throw an exception in here? Let's see. I'm not understanding why that is happening. Yeah, all my exceptions are basically the same. So, except I cannot throw an exception in this particular class, I have no idea. So what one can do is, let's say, So it picks it up now. Method called expected through new. Oh, through new, sorry. That's why. Through new, so I mistake. I was supposed to be able to import this otherwise, so I don't know what's happening there. So through new exception cannot run. So through an exception will handle the exception. We can return this value. Okay. Or we could simply just we create a boolean, right? We just create like a bool. So we create a value is valid, right? And what this does is we could allow us to handle the exception properly. We could so we could return is valid. So we could just check if it's valid. So if it's not valid, then we want to throw we can empty or null exception, but again it comes with a bad request, so we may want to refactor this. But for now, it's still a bad request, so we can do like a special character exception, which is the same thing. But again, you can just create a custom exception here, a special character exception. It's still going through a bad request. For now, we're going to reuse this empty or null exception. So input contains special characters only. So input contains special characters. Only alphanumeric characters are allowed. They'll go, and then we can now just return is valid, okay, which is definitely, well, we can just return true, right? Basically, we don't need to return is valid again, because in that case, it is true when it's down here. And this is how we can handle that particular situation. Although I think that the validator will definitely have a different response, but let's check it out. Right, so I'm going to test out two things. Eventually, I'm going to check this one out, and then I'm going to remove this implementation and just return is valid to see if the validator itself has a return response, something like that. So we're going to check that out. So unexpected exception doing is valid call. So what happens is that this throws in unexpected exception thrown, and this is not caught well. So let's check the return is valid. Let's return is valid. I think that should handle itself well. I don't think that this works well with exceptions. I don't think that works well with exceptions, because yes, it's getting that definitely, but you can see unexpected exception doing is valid call, which means that there's a problem and it is running to an issue, and we created that issue. So if I run that, you see, yeah, so it goes bad request. So yeah, so that's what it gives you, but I actually wanted to send a much more custom information. So what if it is empty? What if it is empty? Again, unexpected. So here we're just going to return false. Yeah, so that handles the payload, because I was trying to use the exceptions to handle the request codes and proper messaging. But so we can simply just change the annotation to say field contains special characters. Field is either null, empty, or contains special characters. Right. So that will be our message. So we went through all the trouble for nothing. So I think that doesn't work well with exceptions. So we're going to look into that. There we go. We have the 404 byte request, but it's supposed to return the message. Field is either null. String message default. Let's see. Is there an implementation that we do not return email dot ends with? So constraint validator context, not sure. Yes, it has that. Okay. So it's supposed to return the. So what it's supposed to do is, at least I'm supposed to see it return that image, this, but it is not. Although it's returning a bad request, but the message is not being returned as expected. It's supposed to return the message here, and that's the main problem. So I'm not sure what's happening here. So we are simply just going to return that. So sorry, this video is going to take a bit longer. Okay, we don't need all of this, but we're going to just delete that. Delete and we will remove the implementation data. User not authorized. We have that. So remove this implementation. However, I'm not certain why I'm not getting the message. Okay, so it is definitely validating, but you see this default message, the string message here. I am supposed to be getting this, and I'm not getting it, and I'm worried about that, because then when we use the validator in the custom, we could actually put an input and have like the message which is there, and then we could put something first name contains special character, and normally we are supposed to pass this message and return this message when we have special character like that. Say we have dollar like that, yeah, the first name, but it's just returning a bad request, which is correct, but I'm not getting the message itself. Okay. I would really, really like to return something special. So let me quickly ask GPT, yes, rather than debugging for a long time. Yeah. So hey bot, created. I'm sorry. So we simply just define the class, and then we have the implementation class. Yeah, I'm copying everything for now, so don't worry. It's not how you naturally do it. And then you can notify the response. Spring does not automatically return bin validation messages unless you explicitly handle them. Request. This works hibernate validator sees it, but Spring does not realize it. So do by exception handler. Response map string handle validator errors. Oh, okay, so method documented validator. Okay, so we have to do something like this. Okay, so something like that. We're going to be mapping all of that. That's Java util, or maybe a Spring class. Hash map, that's Java. Okay, so let's see. So what this does, I think it gets the, so what it says, method argument not valid exception. So it gets this exception which is raised in the method argument, right? So I think when we do the validation method, it flags, when it's false, it raises its exception. And then what this, it handles that exception and it extracts the message from that exception and then maps it and then binds it now to the response. Right, so x dot get bind the result dot get field errors dot for each error it's going to get the error message and it's going to add them to the error map which we've created, and then it's going to return all of them in the request. So basically we are interrupting the code. So I think this particular class, when we implement this, we are overriding the implementation of Spring validation, which handles this particular exception, and we're doing our own custom return. So hopefully that works. There we go. And so we have first name contains special characters, something like that. If we leave it, so if we don't do any particular validation here, we don't do any particular message here, okay, then the default message should be the one that goes. Okay. So that's the default message. Field is either null, empty, or so this is the kind of message you really want to get to send, not your entire response as we used to do, as we saw earlier. It allows you to customize the error message and not overwhelm the developers, and also don't give much information to the hackers. So that's the kind of thing you want to do. And what we have simply seen today is we cannot perform privilege escalation using DTOs, and with additional validation we can validate each field, and this can go beyond just text. You can go to objects and other form of data. You can validate their length, their type in the validator, and use custom annotations like we have just seen to make validation easier and reusable. It's better design. And for the mapper, we see when we did mapping, we simply did in the user service, this particular section of code, this update section, it's called normally a mapping, right? What we are doing, we're mapping the fields, or the fields in the request to the fields in the data object, okay? And what we're doing here can be extracted to its another function called, we can have map mappers. You can create like another field, just like another, just for proper separation. We create like another package. We can have like a mapper, right? Mappers, right? It could also be like a utility. So this is small. There are also libraries that already exist, and we can have like an interface that so we can have like a mapper. You can have two options. So you can have two options. So we can have a mapper that takes in two variables. We have the primitive, the entity, and the DTO, right? So we have two methods, to DTO and to entity. So to DTO is you. So we can also have like a comment just to make sure that generic mapper interface, that is the entity type, and the DTO type. There we go. So that when you hover over these, you have proper documentations. Again, this is something new that I just introduced. This is proper documentation. You always want to document your methods, and so you have, these are generics. We're using generic programming in Java. We are creating generic objects, and what this allows us to do is create two methods, which we can now create another class. We can call user mapper, right? And that class can now implement the mapper class. And again, the mapper class, don't forget, takes in two. So if you hover over it, you're going to see it takes in one parameter, which is the entity, and in this case that's the user, and the next parameter, which is the DTO. But in this case, we're not looking at the user DTO. Sorry, in this case we are looking at response. Right, response. Is it request? User request. Is it update request? Is it update? What is it? Update request, yeah. Update request. We can open that. We can implement that. We can import the class, and then we have all of that. And so we can now extract this method. We can do we're converting the user, we're converting to the DTO, so we're converting from the entity to the DTO, but this is what we're doing, we're converting from the DTO, which is what we're attempting to do here, this one, we're converting from the DTO, which is the request map, the update request, which is the DTO, to the entity. So what we need to do is, in the user mapper, we need to implement this method, and what we can do is we can extract this method. So what we can do is we can say, okay, for the user, so you will say we're going to check using and we don't actually want to return anything, since in Java objects are passed by references. We really don't want to, in this case we don't want to, right? We just want to avoid that. Okay, want to avoid. Okay, we also want to avoid that. Okay, so that allows us to do, at least in this case, void. Okay, and also void. Okay, and so there's no return here, right? And there's also no return. So what we want to do is using ternary operators and check if DTO dot get first name So we already checked with the validator, so we don't need to check dot first name dot validator. So we want to check. So uh, anyway, with the validator, yes, we already checked the empty and also special characters. You can add other validators here. So around here, we are expecting to have the string that we require. So it's either going to be an updated string or the same string. So we really don't care whether it's an updated or the same. So we just want to do dot set. So what we want to do to entity, we're going to do um, what is happening? So technically, this is a bit different because we'll be creating a new user. However, what I don't want to do is create a new user. So we'll do two of them. T, and this will be like T. I'll have that. Yeah, so something like that. And it will be the same thing up here, but just for now, implement the latter. This will implement this one, the one below, and we want to get to the user, and I'll be like user. Okay, and so here we're going to check user dot set first name equals to get first name, and user dot set last name equals to get last name. And with this, we have implemented two DTOs. So here we can also do the same thing, but for now we'll avoid that for implementation for later. And we can come here, and rather than having all of this code here, we've extracted it to another component, which is this one. And we have to remember to annotate this to make sure that Spring manages that particular component. And we can use it, since it's a service, it's a mapper service, we can annotate it with a service class, or you can annotate it with a component. It depends on you, but usually it's always important to annotate it with what it is. So this is service class. And in the service layer, we can now auto wire this into, we can private mapper, right? And so we can, since we are using the mapper, so we can auto wire that in. Service. So we have a mapper, so it takes in the user and the ID update, right? And what this happens, we can. I also think that to avoid this extra stuff here, there is a way of doing this where I think we specify value or something. I think it's the user mapper, yes. And so when we call the user mapper, it will just pick in this, so that right here we don't have to specify all of this. We can just, I think, mapper and have something like a user mapper, something like that. Raw use of parameter class. I think that should be correct. Although, anyway, I don't know. Anyway, I'll check, but I just want to test to see my memory serves me right. And then we are just going to get the implementations here, which is these two update the user detail and call mapper. So user mapper dot to entity, and we're going to pass the object T, which is the class, the user class, the user entity. So we have DB user. No, so we have user actually, user and request. So user and request. Uncheck call to entity as a member of the raw type contain. think it should be, and once that is mapped, if it is the same, then we're going to see it. But I know that that should work. Let's see that in practice. So change that to hello, and there we go. So it maps perfectly well, despite the error. And so I think that is the case. What it's just doing is warning us unchecked, so we can suppress those errors because unchecked use of all class, we can suppress warnings unchecked. And which one is this? Use of raw. Is it raw or types? Yeah, there we go. And you have a much cleaner stuff. But let's see if we have another method, say file type. Okay. But for now it's just one, so it will definitely use it. So let me just confirm. If I have a mapper class and I don't want to call it in as a dependency as such, private, so like a private mapper user DTO. What do I do? Call it just the same thing. So that's what we did here. Oh, so we add a qualifier. Yeah, so I knew that was missing something like that. A qualifier, user mapper. Yeah, there we go. So that completed. Does it? Kind of, we moved that there. Oh, yeah. Technically, if we are already doing this, we don't need the qualifier here. This is the most production. This is what most production app use. When we're already doing this, we don't need the qualifier here because it literally just goes and pick this. So the qualifier itself, I think the qualifier should be enough. So we can have oh no, that's not what I'm asking. So all right, so again, since we're doing better approach, we can simply just use the user, and it's not going to cost us anything. I just wanted to look at that particular thing to check myself unchecked. Then that unchecked becomes very redundant. So it's no longer needed there. All right, so that's it. You could basically do that. So you can add multiple different mappers, post mapper, find mapper, and different mappers there, and extract the mapping method, allowing you to reuse that over and over and over again. So for a method that was supposed to be long, you see we've reduced it to be very short. And again, we don't need to have this, where is it? We don't need to validate the inputs themselves. So the inputs are already validated and all that. We can also check for ID, make sure that ID is validated, so we can have different validation method. So we need to add, say, in the controller, we can have not empty, update, where's update? The ID section, we can have add not null, not null, right? So to make sure that this does not return null. Yeah, so that's it. That's all what we have today. Not now. We can also have, I think, message. Does it? Oh, it doesn't have message. Right. So for something like this has taken longer than I expected it to take, but it's good because we got to see different things. If I did say null and I send, JSON pass cannot construct instance of the update request. Program ID is marked not null, but it's null. So it's giving a lot of information right there, very bad there. So we may want to catch that error too and do something with it, right? So we can create our own custom errors and our own custom validator. So you see what happens when you use like default. Defaults are not exactly so cool because like I said, like this has already exposed a lot about your application. Your developers already know your application structure and they can use this information very badly. So you want to avoid simple stuff like this. Yeah, so we can do our own, we could catch our own custom null and catch our own exceptions and then return the value in the exception, just like we did for the null constraint, the not contains special character. So that said, I have shown you, we have looked at privilege escalation in the last video. We talked about mass assignment. We have looked at how to protect against mass assignment using DTOs, allowing you to specify just the inputs And also, we can also make sure that we create a DTO for the response. Although we are getting everything here, we also want to do something like for the response. We can also just return, let's say, in the controller, we can force the controller here in the update section to rather return users. We can also just return a different DTO that we create. And in the service class, when we have updated the user, after this, we are not going to return just yet. We are going to now convert this back to DTO, that DTO that we are talking about. And that's why we have two methods here, to entity and to DTO. So we convert it from the database to the DTO so that we can send it back to the controller and return the appropriate amount. So maybe we just want to return just the ID, the first name and the last name, just like that, and we return just that particular value. So you've seen how to control input and output in your API using DTOs. We have seen how to prevent mass assignment using the DTOs. We have also seen how to prevent privilege escalation using DTOs, because you prevent them from having access to this and from your system to compute adding this to the database. We also use validation, allowing you to create custom validations, making sure that you send appropriate errors and not expose your data to, or your structure, your file and your system structure to developers, and also make sure to prevent user control input from being used to cause harm to your system. Thus far, we have looked at different validation techniques and other safety measures you can add. I think these basics should get you up and running to building production-ready software and APIs. So thank you again for staying to the end. I hope you've enjoyed this series thus far. I hope you have liked this video. I hope you have learned a lot. You have seen how to research. Although we use GPT, I try my best to make sure that I don't use it as much, to use basic documentation, because reality is that though this is slower, as you can see, we have looked at basic, medium, and if we could go to Spring, I don't think Spring has the documentation for that. But if we go to other things, other software, you will see that they have other implementation. Usually, this is what was being done the whole time before GPT came along and made things very easy. I had development like this, and this was interesting, fun sometimes, but also painful. Again, not everything that GPT is going to tell you. Some bugs you find in the production server, especially in places like if you have done a bit of Kubernetes, where it's not so much as perfectly documented as the errors, not the structure itself. Some errors you will not find them on GPT. GPT might not be able to help you, give you the exact answer. You still need to use documentations and other sites and go through them and read them, as we try to do. So learn how to do that, both use GPT and reading from other sites, and it's going to help you a lot. So I hope you like this video. Like, share, subscribe to the channel, comment your questions below, and I'm going to get to you as soon as possible. This is going to be uploaded soon, and this particular code is going to be committed. So in the next course, we're going to be looking at another security option. I'm going to keep that a surprise. So check in a few to see what we study next. That said, my name is Ngane Emmanuel. I'm a software engineer, and thank you for watching. Have a nice day.